Kandy is a city located in the central highlands of Sri Lanka. Home to the Temple of the Tooth Relic, Kandy is a sacred city enveloped by exceptional cultural and historical attractions. With all this beauty, it is appalling to find out that there is an extremely polluted canal, the Mid-Canal, flowing from the heart of the second largest city, which is probably the most beautiful city of Sri Lanka, that is, Kandy. The curiosity drove me to analyze the problem with a scientific approach. To achieve this, I required a team of scientists, including environmental scientists, medical experts, engineers, and most importantly, I required knowledgeable inhabitants. For this research, I followed a route taken by the Middle Canal and observed the polluted water from different places until it reached the river Mahaveli. We commenced our journey from near the Kandy city centre, where the canal begins from Kandy Lake. During our site visit, we did a gross evaluation of the levels of pollution, and we also identified sites for sample collection. To start off the journey, we visited a pond near the KCC car park, which is opposite the main entrance. This pond was well hidden from sight by large plants covering the path. The only notable thing about the pond was its excruciating stink, which laid out the path towards the poorly protected water pool. The prime problem of this site was its lack of spacing. Water falls from higher up and gets collected in a pond-like area where all the man-made garbage, which includes cans, bottles, and plastic, gets stored up. These piles of waste, along with the fragments of decaying trees, twigs, and leaves, prevent the water from flowing properly, and therefore resulting in stagnation. In addition to all of these, the water pool also had a small rail-like gate at the end of the pond, acting as another barrier blocking the water flow. I was shocked to see a long dead fish floating in the middle of the garbage-filled water pool. It was missing its eyes and most of its tail, and it was the only sign of life in this pond. This dead fish proved that the water pool must have once been a clean and safe pond, flourishing with life. All in all, this place is unclean, dirty, it's stinky, and the collection of garbage creates an environmental hazard. Next, we went to visit the subway tunnels, which is situated close to the lake ground, not too far from the main entrance to KCC. This time, however, we weren't able to closely observe the canal and we had to stay some distance apart. And as a result, the actual stink wasn't as strong as before. Here, the water was comparatively more cleaner and clearer than in the previous pond we went to visit. This was possibly because the water had an uninterrupted path to flow downhill. Therefore, all the dumped garbage and filth would be washed down along with the water. In relation to the previous site, more life grew in this place, like water plants. Plants and trees covered the weave of the waterway. As the hilly region came to an end, we saw a huge lump of plastics and garbage all piled up at the bottom. The third site we visited was a little far off from KCC. Unlike the previous two sites, this place was an inhabited place, almost like a village, with adjoined houses and narrow pathways to walk across. In here, the Middle Canal followed a polluted pathway through the drains which was saturated with garbage and filth. I would say that the principal reason for water pollution in this area is the human behavior. There is used water with soap, waste, and dirt flowing through the unprotected and open drains. On top of that, people dispose of their unwanted goods, such as wrappers, polythene bags, unwanted plastic items, and even wires were dumped into the drains. This place did not stink and isn't as filthy as the first two places, but it is dominated by crows feeding on small food particles and other leftovers on the floor. One interesting discovery we made was a type of plant breed which grew in these large polluted drains. These plants have the ability to absorb its essential nutrients from the polluted water and thus grow in the drains. This can also be identified as a solution to improve the condition of partially polluted water. The plants can absorb all its necessary nutrients from the filth and therefore reduce the overall pollution content in the water. An additional advantage of these plants is that it can also be used to promote a more beautiful environment around the drains, giving us a pleasant sight. Afterwards, we went to visit the water treatment plant behind the Kandy Hospital. This is the only water treatment plant where the hospital sewage line undergoes a treatment process before finally being emitted to the Mahaveli River through the canal. This is where all the hospital waste and other sewage gets cleaned. Therefore, the stink was at its peak. There were 6 tanks altogether which purified the water. We spoke with some of the people operating the water treatment plant and learned from them the different stages in purifying the water along with what happens in each stage. To begin the process, all the sewage water from the lines are collected in 2 large 40 feet deep tanks, which is then given a large content of chlorine. The purpose of these tanks is to drain the water and send the excess waste into 2 other tanks for solidification. It is then left in these new tanks for 28 days to solidify. Once solidified, it is powdered to be used as fertilizers for plants. The remaining drained water is sent to the final tank, which consists of 6 tunnel-like structures, which looks like drains, to filter the chlorine water before it is finally sent into the Mahaveli River. Sewage coming from the hospital is automatically controlled by the water motors. Although the water treatment process produces fertilizers out of the hospital sewage, which is a great and efficient use of sewage, the water which is emitted into the lake is still polluted. The water reaching the Mahaveli River is pitch black in color and is very thick. This is a gross indicator of how filthy and unclean the water is, even after undergoing a treatment process. Estimating on the height of the water content in these tanks, there is a huge risk of all the tanks overflowing during a rainy season. The water treatment plant is situated behind the hospital and is stationed well away from people. For the next site, we went to a bridge built above the middle canal flowing into the river. This part of the canal had very little water flowing through and instead had a much larger percentage of garbage. The main problem in here is once again the human behavior and the attitude of the population in this area. The people have taken the liberty to dump all their litter, which ranges from old slippers, wrappers, plastic bottles and cans to entire bags of garbage into the canal. Birds usually tend to rest on top of these garbage piles, and they also drink water from the lake. So the large content of plastic in the lake can lead to microscopic plastic particles entering the bloodstream of these animals, which drink water from the lake, affecting the health of these animals. Another issue is that all the broken branches, twigs, and leaves which fall into the lake create a huge blockage of the water flow, causing the litter piles to increase in size. And finally, we went to see the place where the canal meets the Mahaveli River. We observed the canal from the Gannoruwa Palama in Getambe. Here, the water is all clean and clear in so many places, so much that it even shimmers in the light. However, the water coming from the canal is still mostly dirty as it clearly stands out. This water has a misty sort of brownish powder in it, and it can be clearly recognized as it flows beside the clear water of the Mahaveli River. So although the water is treated for its sewage and pollution content, it is only done once. Even after the water undergoes a treatment, more new waste is thrown into the canal by the general population as the middle canal continues its journey towards the river. Therefore, the water reaching the river is still mostly polluted. From all what I have learned and witnessed about the Middle Canal, I came to the conclusion that much of the water pollution in the canal is a result of the lack of protection towards the canal and the human behavior. Much of the pollution is from the buildup of plastics. For example, litter bags, plastic bottles, food wrappers, and so on. There are no active surveillance or functional restrictions and rules against dumping litter into the canal. Nor are there any protective structures or banners such as fences or anti-pollution posters anywhere near the canal. So naturally, people would throw all their waste into the canal. In my opinion, establishing proper infrastructure around the canal and educating the population about water pollution would greatly reduce the amount of pollution in the Middle Canal in the future. However, to totally eliminate the unpleasant nature and the environmental impact of the canal, a scientific approach is required. It would have to include both macroscopic as well as microscopic level changes. And with that, we have reached the end of the video. Thank you.